Continuing where I left off, Chapter 5, Book 2. That same evening, in Denisov's quarters, a spirited discussion took place among the officers of the squadron. "And I tell you, Rostov, that you must apologize to the colonel," said a tall staff captain with large features, a wrinkled face, grizzle-haired, and an enormous mustache, addressing Rostov, who was crimson with excitement. Captain Kirsten had twice been reduced to the ranks for affairs of honor and had twice been reinstated. "I permit no one to call me a liar," cried Rostov in a shrilled voice. "He said I was lying, and I told him he was lying, and there it rests. He can put me on duty every day. He can place me under arrest, but no one can make me apologize, because if he, as commander of the regiment, considers it beneath his dignity to give me satisfaction, then—" "Now wait a minute, my boy. You listen to me," interrupted the staff captain in his deep bass, calmly stroking his long mustache. "You tell the regimental commander, in the presence of other officers, that an officer has stolen. It's not my fault that the conversation began in the presence of other officers. Perhaps I ought not to have spoken before them, but I am no diplomat. That's why I joined the hussars. I thought that here supply would not be required, but he tells me I'm lying, so let him give me satisfaction." "That's all very well. No one thinks you are a coward, but that's not the point. Ask Denisov whether it isn't out of the question for a cadet to demand satisfaction of a regimental commander." Denisov was gnawing his mustache and listening to the conversation with a morose expression, apparently not wanting to take part in it. He answered the staff captain's question with a negative shake of the head. "You speak to the regimental commander about this unsavory business in the presence of other officers," continued the staff captain. "Bogdanich, the regimental commander, shut you up." "He didn't shut me up. He said I wasn't speaking the truth." "All right, so you talk a lot of nonsense to him, and now you have to apologize." "Oh, no account," cried Rostov. "I did not expect this of you," said the staff captain, seriously and sternly. "You refuse to apologize. But, my boy, it is not only where he is concerned, but before the whole regiment, before all of us, that you are entirely at fault. It's like this. If you had thought it over and had asked advice on how to handle the matter. But no, you go and blurt it all out before the officers. Now, what was the colonel to do? Bring the officer to trial and besmirch the whole regiment? Disgrace the whole regiment because of one scoundrel? Is that how you look at it? Well, we don't see it that way. And Bogdanich did well to tell you you weren't speaking the truth. It's not pleasant, but what's to be done? You got yourself into it, my boy, and now, when they want to hush it up, you, out of sheer arrogance, instead of apologizing, want to come out with the whole story. You're insulted at being put on the duty roster for a while. But what would it cost you to apologize to an old and honorable officer? Whatever Bogdanich may be, he's a brave and honorable old commander. And though you're quick to take offense, you don't mind disgracing the whole regiment." The staff's captain's voice began to tremble. "You, my boy, have been in the regiment a very short time. You're here today. Tomorrow you'll go off somewhere as an adjutant, and it's all the same to you if they say. There are thieves among the Pavlograd officers, but it isn't all the same for us. Am I right, Denisov?" "It is not the same." Denisov remained silent and did not move. From time to time he glanced at Rostov with his sparkling eyes. "You hold your pride dear, and you don't want to apologize. But we, the old men who have grown up, and God willing, are going to die in the regiment. We prize the honor of the regiment. The Bogadash knows it. Oh, how we prize it, my boy. And you are wrong. Wrong. You may take offense or not, but I always speak my mind. You are wrong. And the staff captain stood up and turned away from Rostov. That's true, damn it, shouted Desnov, jumping up. Come, Rostov, come now. Rostov, flushing and turning pale by turns, looked from one officer to another. No, gentlemen, no. You don't think I understand very well, but why I talk. I'll prove it in action, and for me, the honor of the flag. Well, in any case, am I to blame? There were tears in his eyes. I'm entirely to blame. Well, what more do you want? Now, that's right, Count, cried the staff captain, turning and clapping Rostov on the shoulder with his big hand. I'll tell you, shouted Desnov. He's a fine fellow. That's better, Count, said the staff captain, once more addressing him by his title, as if in acknowledgment of his omission. Go and apologize. Your Excellency, yes, sir. Gentlemen, I'll do anything. No one shall hear a word from me, said Rostov in an imploring voice. But I cannot apologize, by God. I cannot do what you will. How can I go and apologize like a little boy asking forgiveness? Denisov began to laugh. It will be the worse for you. Bogadash holds a grudge. He'll make you pay for your obstinacy, said Christian. By God, it's not obstinacy. I can't describe the feeling, I can't. Well, as you please, said the staff captain. And what has become of that scoundrel? He asked Denisov. He has reported himself sick, and he's been ordered off tomorrow's list, muttered Denisov. It is an illness. There's no other way of explaining it, said the staff captain. Illness or not, he better not cross my path. I'll kill him, shouted Desnov in a bloodthirsty tone. Just then Zherkov came into the room. What brings you here? Several officers quickly asked him. We're going into action, gentlemen. Mack has surrendered with his entire army. It's not true. I've seen him myself. What? You've seen the living Mack? With arms and legs? Into action! Action! Bring a bottle for such news. But how do you happen to be here? I've been sent back to the regiment on account of that devil Mack. An Austrian journal made a complaint about him. I congratulated him on Mack's arrival. What's the matter with you, Rostov? You look as if you'd just come out of a steam bath. Oh, what a mess we've had on our hands these last 2 days, my friend. A regimental adjutant entered and confirmed the news brought by Zherkov. They were ordered to advance the next day. We're going into action, gentlemen. Well, thank God, we've been sitting here too long. Chapter 6. Kutuzov fell back in the direction of Vienna, destroying behind him the bridges over the rivers in at Branu and Tron at Linz. On October 23rd, the Russian troops were crossing the river Inns. At midday, the Russian baggage train, artillery, and columns of troops were defiling through the towns of Inns on both sides of the bridge. It was a warm, rainy autumnal day, the broad perspective opening out from the height, where Russian batteries were guarding the bridge, was at times veiled by a gossamer curtain of slanting rain. Then suddenly would emerge again, and distant objects, as though freshly varnished, became clearly visible in the sunshine. The little town below could be seen with its white, red-roofed houses, its cathedral, and its bridge, on both sides of which steamed swarming masses of Russian troops. Also visible at the bend of the Danube were ships, an island, and a castle with a park surrounded by the waters of the confluence of the Inns and the Danube, the crafty left bank of which was covered with pine forests, and beyond, a mysterious background of green ridges and blue ravines. The turrets of a numerary rose above what seemed wild, virgin forests, and far away across the Inns, the enemy's cavalry patrols could be seen on the hillside. The general in command of the rear guard stood with an officer of his suite in front of the field guns on the height, surveying the terrain through a field glass. A little beyond them, Nevesky, who had been sent out to the rear guard by the commander-in-chief, was sitting on the tail of a gun carrier. The Cossack was accompanied him, had handled him a pouch and a flask, and he was treating some of the officers to pasties and real dopaux kumel. The officers delightedly gathered around him, some kneeling, some sitting cross-legged on the wet grass. Yes, that's Austrian prince who built his castle. Here was no fool. It's a lovely spot. But why aren't you eating, gentlemen? Said Nevesky. Thank you very much, Prince, replied one of the officers, pleased to be talking to a staff officer of such importance. It is a beautiful spot. We passed right by the park and saw 2 deer, and what a wonderful house. Look, Prince, said another, who would have liked very much to take another pasty, but was ashamed to, and so pretended to be examining the countryside. Look, our infantry's already there, over there, on the meadow beyond the village. 3 of them are dragging something. They'll clean out that castle, he observed with evident approval. No doubt about it, said Nevesky, but what I should like, he added, his handsome, moist lips munching a pasty, would be to slip over there. He smiled, his eyes lighting up and narrowing as he pointed to the turreted nunnery on the hillside. That would be very nice indeed, gentlemen. The officers laughed. Just to scare the nuns a little. They say there are some young Italian girls among them. I'd give 5 years of my life. I really would. Must be dull for them too, said one of the bolder officers, laughing. Meanwhile, the staff officer standing in the foreground pointed out something to the general. The general looked through his field glass. Yes, so it is, he said angrily, lowering the glass and shrugging his shoulders. So it is. They're going to fire on them at the crossing. And why are they dawdling there? On the opposite side, the enemy was visible to the naked eye, and from their battery rose the milk-white smoke, followed by distant report of a shot, and our troops could be seen hurrying to the crossing. Nevesky got up, puffing, and went to the general with a smile. Would your excellency care to have a bite to eat? He asked. A bad business, said the general, without answering him. Our men were too slow. Shall I ride over, your excellency? Said Nevesky. Yes, please do, replied the general, and he repeated an order that had already been given in detail. Tell the hussars that they are to cross last, to fire the bridge as I ordered, and to inspect the combustible material on the bridge again. Very good, said Nevesky. He called the Cossack, who was with his horse, told him to pick up the pouch and the flask, and lightly swung his heavy body into the saddle. I think I'll pay a visit to the nuns, he said to the smiling officers, who stood watching him ride down the winding mountain path. Now then, Captain, let's see how far it will carry. Give it a try, said the general to the artillery officer. Have a little fun, just to pass the time. Man the guns, commanded the officer. In the moment, the artillerymen cheerfully ran up from the campfires and commenced loading. 1, came the command. Number 1 briskly jumped aside. The report rang out with a deafening metallic roar, and a whistling artillery shell flew over the heads of our troops below the hill, falling far short of the enemy. A puff of smoke showed where it had fallen and burst. The faces of the officers and men lit up at the sound. Everyone got up and began watching the movements of our troops, plainly visible below, and those of the approaching enemy farther off. At that very instant the sun emerged from behind the clouds, and the splendid sound of that solitary report and the brilliant sunshine mingled in one joyous, exhilarating impression. Chapter 7. 2 enemy cannonballs had already flown over the bridge, which was teeming with men. Halfway across the bridge, having dismounted, Prince Nevesky stood with his big body wedged against the railing. He laughingly looked back at his Cossack, who was several paces behind him, holding the 2 horses by their bridles. No sooner did Prince Nevesky try to move on, than soldiers and wagons bore down on him. again forcing him back against the railing, and all he could do was smile. "Hey there, my lad," said the Cusack to a soldier driving a baggage wagon through foot soldiers who were pressed right up against the horses and wheels. "What a fellow! Can't you wait a minute? You see the general wants to pass." The driver took no notice of the word general, and continued to shout at the soldiers blocking his way. "Hey there, friends, keep to the left, wait." But the friends, crowding shoulder to shoulder, their bayonets interlocked, moved across the bridge in a compact mass. Looking down over the railing, Prince Nevesky saw the swift, turbulent, shallow waves of the ends rippling, eating and churning around the piles in endless sequence. Looking back at the bridge, he saw the equally uniform lining waves of soldiers, the tassel cords covered shakos, knapsacks, bayonets, long muskets, and under the shakos faces with broad cheekbones and hollow cheeks wearing listless expressions, and feet among through the vicious mud that covered the bridge, sometimes in the midst of monotonous waves of men, like a fleck of white foam on the waves of the Ems. An officer wearing a cloak and with a face different from those of the soldiers forced his way through, sometimes, like a chip of wood swirling on the river. A hussar on foot, an orderly, or an inhabitant of the town was carried along by the waves of infantry men. And sometimes, like a log floating down the river, an officer's or company's leather-covered baggage train, piled high and hemmed in all on sides, moved across the bridge. "Look at them. It's as if dam had burst," said the Cossack, hopelessly at a standstill. "Are there many more still to come?" "1,000,000 minus one," said a jolly soldier in a torn coat, winking as he passed out of sight. After him came another, an old man. "If he meant the enemy, starts grilling the bridge now," he said glumly, "you won't stop to scratch yourself." And he passed by. After him came a soldier riding on a wagon. "Damn it! Where did he stick those leg wrappers?" exclaimed an orderly, rummaging the back wagon as he ran along behind it. He and the wagon passed. Then came a hilarious group of soldiers who had evidently been drinking. And then he gives him one right in the teeth with the butt end of a gun. One of them, a soldier with his greatcoat well tucked up, said gleefully with a broad swing of his arm. "Yes, that ham was tasty, all right," said another with a loud laugh. And they too passed by, so that Nevesky never learned who had been hit in the teeth or what the ham had to do with it. "What a rush they're in!" But just let him shoot one little bullet, and you'd think they were all being slaughtered, a non-commissioned officer said in angry disapproval. "When one of those things whizzed by me, Pop, I just about died of fright," said a young officer with an enormous mouth, scarcely able to keep from laughing. "I really did. I was that scared. It was bad," he said, as if bragging of his fear. And he went on. Then followed the wagon unlike any that had gone before. It was a German cart, drawn by 2 horses and loaded, it seemed, with the possessions of an entire household. Tied to the back of the cart, which was led by a German, was a fine brindle cow with a huge udder. On top of some featherboard sat a woman with an infant in her arms, an old woman, and a healthy, red-cheeked German girl. Apparently these uprooted peasants had been granted special permission to pass. The eyes of all the soldiers turned toward the woman, and while the cart was passing at a walking pace, all the remarks related to the 2 younger ones. Every face wore an almost identical smile, reflecting their indecent thoughts about the women. "Looks like Fritz is clearing out too." "Sell us the missus," said another soldier, addressing the German, who, angry and frightened, strolled along with downcast eyes. "See how dolled up they are? What devils! How'd you like to be billeted on them, Fedotov? What do you think, brother?" "Where are you going?" asked an infantry officer, who was eating an apple and half smiling as he started at the handsome girl. The German closed his eyes, signifying that he did not understand. "Take it if you like," said the officer, giving the girl the apple. She smiled and took it. Nevesky, like all the men on the bridge, did not take his eyes off the woman till they had passed. When they had gone by, the same stream of soldiers followed, the same talk, and at last all came to a standstill. As often happens, the horses of a company wagon stopped short at the end of the bridge, and the whole crowd had to wait. "And what are they stopping for? What about getting some order here?" the soldiers were saying. "What the hell are you shoving for? Can't you wait? It'll be still worse if he sets fire to the bridge. See? Here's an officer jammed in too, various members of the block crowd were saying as they looked at one another, all pressing forward toward the end of the bridge. Looking down at the waters of the ends of the bridge, Nevesky suddenly heard a sound he had not heard before of something swiftly approaching, something big, something that just splashed into the water. Just see how far it carries, one of the soldiers standing nearby said grimly. Encouraging us to move on a little faster, said another uneasily. The crowd moved forward again. Nevesky realized that it was a cannonball. Hey, Cossack, my horse, he cried. You, there, stand aside, out of the way, out of the way. He made his way to the horse with great difficulty, continuing to shout as he moved forward. The soldiers pressed back to make way for him, and again surged against him, so that his leg was jammed, but those nearest him were not to blame, for they were violently pushed from behind. Nevesky, Nevesky, you dog, came a hoarse voice from behind him. Nevesky looked back and saw, some 15 paces away, and separated from him by a living mass of moving infantry, the red face of Vaska Denisov, his cap on the back of his tousled black head, his cloak flung jauntily over his shoulder. Tell these devils, these fiends, to let me pass, shouted Desnov in a paroxysm of rage, his cloaked black eyes with their bloodshot whites flashing and rolling as he waved his sheath saber in a small bare hand as red as his face. Aha, Vasya! Nevesky responded joyfully. What are you doing here? It's impossible for the squadron to advance, shouted Desnov, wrathfully baring his white teeth and spurring on his handsome raven Budan. The horse was twitching its ears as the bayonets pricked him, snorting and flicking foam from his bit. The clatter of his hoofbeats resounded on the planks of the bridge, and he looked as though he would have jumped over the railings had his rider let him. What is this? They're like sheep, just like sheep. Out of the way. Stop there, you devil with the wagon. I'll make hash of you with this saber, he shouted, actually drawing the saber from his scabbard and brandishing it. The soldiers shrank back with terrified faces, and Desnov joined Nevesky. How is it you're not drunk today? Asked Nevesky when he reached him. They don't even give us time to drink, replied Vaska Desnov. They keep wagging the wagnement to and fro all day. If we're to fight, let's fight, but God knows what this is. What a dandy you are today, said Nevesky, inspecting his new cloak and saddlecloth. Desnov smiled, drew out his saber-tick, a handkerchief smelling of scent, and thrusted it under Nevesky's nose. Of course, I'm going to action. I shaved, cleaned my teeth, and perfumed myself. The imposing figure of Nevesky, accompanied by his Cossack, and the determination of Desnov, brandishing his saber and desperately shouting, had such an effect that they managed to squeeze through to the other side of the bridge and stop the infantry. At the end of the bridge, Nevesky found the colonel to whom he was delivered the order, and after executing his commission, started to ride back. Denisov, having cleared the way, remained at the end of the bridge, loosely holding in his stallion, which was pawing the ground and trying to pull away to join its fellows. He watched the squadron moving toward him. A thud of hoofbeats, as of several galloping horses, resounded on the planks of the bridge. And the squadron, the officers in front, the men marching four abreast, extended the bridge and emerged on the other side. Forced to halt, the infantry stood crowded together in the trampled mud on the bridge, gazing at the clean, smart hussars riding past them in good order with that special feeling of aloofness, ill will, and the derision with which the different units of the army generally confront one another. A fine lot, all dressed up for the fair. What use are they? They keep them just for show. Don't kick up dust there, infantry, jested a hussar, whose prancing horse had splashed mud on a foot soldier. I'd like to send you out on a 2 days' march with a knapsack. That fancy braid of yours would show a little. Where? Said the infantryman, wiping the mud off his face with his sleeve. You look more like a bird than a man perched up there. They ought to put you up on a horse, Sicken. You look fine now, wouldn't you? Said a corporal, bantering with a thin little soldier bent under the weight of his knapsack. Put a stick between your legs, that'll do for you. A horse, a hussar called out. And I'm going to leave it off there. Thank you so much for watching the video. Please give it a thumbs up, a thumbs down, subscribe, or you can watch. And if you have any comments, please leave some. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.